Welcome to the No Quit Living podcast. Our primary objective is to motivate and inspire our listeners to never quit. The reality of life is simple. We all fall. We all fail. At times, we get knocked down. The question is, do we get back up? Are we stronger? Are we better prepared to attain the maximum of our potential? Thank you for joining our No Quit tribe. As you go for your greatness today, never quit. And remember, we rise by lifting others up. Welcome to episode number 463 of the No Quit Living podcast. I'm your host, Christopher J. Worth, and today's theme of the day is It's Okay Not to Be Okay. Our quote of the day comes to us from Perry Noble. It's okay not to be okay, but it's not okay to stay that way. There are so many other podcasts you could be listening to, and we truly appreciate you tuning into the No Quit Living podcast. If you find value in our show, we would kindly ask if you could please share, subscribe, and leave us a rating on either iTunes or Spotify. We truly appreciate that, and your support means so much to us. Thank you. I really enjoyed speaking with today's guest. I was actually first introduced to Jason Lacayo when he shared one of our prior guest episodes on social media. Talk about 1 degree of separation. I know you will enjoy today's episode. Jay, I'd like to welcome you to the No Quit Living podcast.
Happy to be here, man. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to come on the podcast, my man.
I know the answer, but I always ask it to everybody, but are you ready to positively impact at least one person today?
Absolutely.
The number one objective of our show is to motivate and inspire listeners to never give up. And I was curious if you have either a no-quit story yourself or a really challenging time where you could have given up or given in, but you didn't.
Oh, that's a great intro. I'm going to say 2017, I went through a really rough patch of my life. And at that point, I gave up hope. You know what I mean? I went through a real tumultuous relationship, and, work wasn't really the greatest. And in my mind, I had just quit. And even spiritually, I quit. And I had a good friend reach out to me and say, "Hey, man, you're not who you used to be. Maybe you need to go sit down and talk to somebody." And I think that was the catalyst for me getting to the very place that I'm at right now.
That's so powerful when people are in your corner. And I know a lot of people have reached out to other people, maybe not identical, but similar situations. And a lot of times people either refuse that help or they say, "I'm fine," and they keep going through it. What was, from that point of conversation with your friend to where you are now? I assume you've obviously invested a lot in yourself to get you to the place you are today.
Oh yeah. Got me back into the swing of things, how I used to be. I was a very outgoing, motivated person. And at that particular time, I was just very depressed, and you don't realize it when you go through it. It's like you're in the middle of a boxing fight, right? And your corner man is telling you that, they're watching the fight. And then you get back into the corner, you're thinking you're winning the fight. And then next, they're in there, they're patching up your eye, they're making sure your nose is straight. And that's what I used as an analogy for therapy, right? This person was a therapist, but happened to be like a good family friend of mine. And, she was seeing me change as a human being. Meanwhile, I think I'm winning the fight, when in actuality, I was getting my ass handed to me. So that just was the catalyst for me to, start going to therapy, start working on self-help, and like reading books and, doing stuff that fills my cup.
It's a question I usually ask later on, but you segued into it perfectly. I'm a big reader myself, and we always try to add value to our listeners. But I was curious if you've read anything recently, or you're currently reading something that you'd like to recommend to our listeners.
So I think a book that really changed my life was The 4 Agreements. So that was one book. Eckhart Tolle's The Power of Now. That's another book that really changed me. The Alchemist, I read that. That's a phenomenal book. And if you're really looking to work on, discipline and mental toughness, I would say You Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins.
Have you read his second book?
I'm on that now. I haven't finished it yet.
I'm curious. We'll connect after, but I loved Can't Hurt Me. some of my listeners know, every year for the last 4 years, the first book I read every year is Can't Hurt Me, just because it was so powerful. And the last 2 years, including this year, I read Can't Hurt Me and then never finished, just because it puts me kind of in that mindset where it's just time to get after it. Wanted to ask you if you wouldn't mind briefly just telling our listeners who you are and what you do today.
So I am Jason Lacayo. I'm a police officer for the White Plains Police Department. I have been a police officer for almost 19 years, man. I hit 19 years in July and started with the NYPD, and I transferred over to White Plains in 2007. I worked a little bit of patrol there, got into a specialized unit in 2009. Then from 2009 to about 2013, I was in like a conditions unit, and then I moved over to ESU, which is like our version of SWAT, and we have a rescue portion that's all incorporated. And now I just left there 8 months ago. I'm in the detective division. Currently, right now, I'm assigned to the mental health outreach team, and that's just the gist of who I am professionally.
So, perfect introduction into all that you do, not only within the mental health space, but also you're very involved with reps for responders. And you and I talked offline. We have a bunch of friends in common, but wanted to ask if you could just touch on that for maybe our listeners who don't know much about the mental health space that you touch on, but also if you could maybe introduce them to Reps for Responders.
Yeah, Rest for Responders is a non-for-profit organization that was started up in about 2020 by a New York City cop named Frank Vos. He has a hell of a story. Young man, I feel like he's lived 10 lives, but he had a issue with addiction and managed to get his life back on track. And so what he's doing now is his mission statement is he doesn't want anybody to go through what he went through. So what we do as an organization is provide services to the family members and first responders. So if you're in the first responder space, EMT, firefighter, correctional officer, military, this is a space that you can come and, if you need the resources, you can get help. We sponsor gym memberships. We also sponsor, if you need any kind of therapy, we have therapists that are affiliated with the non-for-profit. So it's a great all-around community because it provides not only, the mental aspect, but the physical aspect as well. And we also do gym meetups where, everybody knows that, humans are creatures that belong in community. And we're very big on that. So we do like a gym meetup. We try to do it, like every 2 months or so. But, obviously when the weather gets a little bit better, we try to meet up a lot more frequently. But Reps for Responders is huge in my life because it helped me give back to those that, that I work with and that we all share the same common bond, which is working in that first responder space. I come from a first responder family. A lot of my friends and family members that I grew up with are first responders in some capacity. So this was a way for me to give back, and just show my appreciation for those who paved the way for me and also those who have suffered the same things that I've suffered.
I think it's so powerful when people have gone through something and when they're at the other side, they look back and figure out ways to pay it forward for others. And I think so many of us struggle, not only just during the pandemic, but even before, with mental health challenges. I don't like the word issues, but I like challenges. And what I've found, it comes in all different shapes, sizes, colors, forms. Some people, it's debilitating. Some people, they push through it. Some people don't have friends like yours that reached out to you. So maybe a tough question, but for somebody that's listening to this episode and they're not a first responder, but they're struggling with something mental health related, do you have a suggestion, or is there something that you would recommend to a friend who possibly reached out to you?
Yeah, just sit down with somebody that you trust and someone that has your best interest at hand because they're going to tell you exactly what you probably don't want to hear, right? A real friend will tell you if you're messing up. A real friend will help you though. So sometimes you'll hear things that you probably don't want to hear, but it's for your best interest. They're not going to let a problem go unaddressed if they really care about you. So just being able to have a support system around you that is 100% transparent, is not going to sugarcoat anything. They're going to tell you, hey, listen, maybe you need to go sit down and have a conversation with somebody. And, it starts there. It's very hard to just say, hey, I want to start therapy or something like that. A lot of people just aren't that open-minded. So if you just sit down and have a conversation with someone in your support system that's going to be 100% transparent with you, that you trust, I believe start there, and then you kind of work your way up the ladder from that point.
I'm curious to get your point of view, but I know where I stand, and I've gone through therapy myself, and during and after a really challenging divorce, I relied on therapy, and I was very fortunate to have some of those friends similar to you where they don't tell you what you want to hear. And then I think the flip side is we all have those friends that we know will sugarcoat things. If you have those, if you're struggling with, let's say, drinking, and you have those friends that even if you're struggling with it, you ask them to go out for a drink, they'll go out for a drink with you. It's those other friends where you'll ask them, hey, you want to go out for a drink, and they'll say no. I know that you're struggling with drinking, and you said you wanted to get a hold of it, so no, I'm not going to support you. But my question to you is, men in general, I feel, have a stigma when it comes to therapy and being open for it. I know I had that a few years back, especially going through my divorce, and it was my mom who actually recommended it, not from the place that I was, going down a spiral, but just to help during the challenging divorce. And I know initially, my wall was up, and I was like, I don't need it, Mom. I'll figure it out. And I had that toughness, grind it out mentality, but I was open to it. And I guess my question to you is, why do you feel, or do you feel that's males in general have a tough time with recognizing, but then being open to really and truly embrace therapy?
Because we're taught to be tough. It's showing weakness is not something that you're taught as a man, right? It's, you got to be tough. When you fall, rub some dirt on it, kid, get back up. So you're taught from, like, literally from the moment you're born, that you have to be this tough guy. And I'm a huge advocate for that. I was talking to Dave about that. It's like, I think men need to get together more and say it's okay to not be okay. It's not easy, dude, because I know I was just like you, man. I was like, nah, I can get through this. And, eventually I knew it was too much for me to do on my own. So I definitely think the stigma of being viewed as weak, because we are, especially in the space of being like a husband, right? You're a provider, you're a protector of your family. So when you're going through those things and you feel like you're not that person anymore because you're just wrapped up in your own, minutiae nonsense that we go through on a day to day, that showing that weakness, which is what, mental challenges kind of are projected to be, right? Like, oh, this guy's losing it, and, he doesn't have his bearings on life. Like, what's wrong with this guy? But, we're human, and we're not impervious to the world and the things that affect us.
I love how you worded that, because I think it's just why I do what I do with No Quit Living. It's, I want everybody to be successful, but for me, I don't learn when somebody's standing on that podium holding up that championship. Now, I want to encourage and support everybody to go after their quote unquote championships. But for me, it's what happens during those tough times. What happens when you lose that game you should have won, or that deal, or that relationship. And I want to be clear, I'm not in any way, do I want to see people fail, but for me, the biggest lessons that I've learned, not only personally, but from others, is during those challenging times where your quote unquote back is up against the wall and you could have given up or you could have quit, but you don't. And my next question always to those people, whether I know them personally or I follow them on social media, is, what allowed you to go through that? Because so many people face adversity each and every day, and many people just give in, they quit, while others don't. And they refuse to give up. But it's during those peaks and valleys, when they're at their lowest point, it's a friend, it's a podcast, it's a book, it's a course, it's somebody that poured into them. And it's so important to have those. Wanted to ask you a question we've been recently asking. Is there anything that you're personally struggling with today that maybe you could share with our listeners that perhaps could could help somebody listening to today's episode?
Oh man, great question. Something that I'm struggling with is just learning how to dial it back. I'm always go, 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 go. And I had to learn how to slow down just a little bit and not so much, I used to be more preoccupied with what's next instead of living in the present. So just being more intentional with my days, waking up with purpose and making sure I'm living in the moment, not looking too far down the road. Because I think everything that we do on a daily basis creates a better future, right? So, I don't dwell on anything in the past, but I know I was looking too much into the future. There's a saying that it's if you want to make God laugh, tell him your plans. So I'm a very calculated person. So I'd have this goal list and I would just, all right, in 6 months, this is going to be this. But sometimes whatever it is that you choose to believe in has a different path, right? I'm a big believer in divine intervention. We're all born and we have a certain life that we're supposed to live, right? There's certain things that we can do to better our situation or worsen our situation. But I think if you just wake up and do a little bit of the good things every single day, you'll eventually get to that. But I think there's things that we want in our life that are things that we necessarily don't need. And we try to tell ourselves, hey man, like, this job will solidify me and make me this person, or this, if I get this girl, or if it's a woman, if I get this guy, it's going to create, a better space for me. And I may not necessarily be, for you, you know what I mean? We want certain things that aren't going to serve us. And so, just having the ability to surrender to a higher power and just existing in the present and just doing what I'm supposed to do on a daily basis will get me to where I need to be. I don't want to set the bar too high. I'm not telling people to settle for mediocrity, but you have to understand there's certain things in our life that we're supposed to have, and there's certain things that we want. And you have to differentiate the difference between the two. So just being more present and being intentional.
I love that, and gotta unpack it, asking from a personal point of view now. One of my really good friends, and actually a couple people in the last probably 6 months, have said the word or the word slow down to me, similar to you. I'm always going, going, going. I set a goal, set a higher one, want to do this, want to do that. I'm curious, do you have a suggestion, or was there something that really worked well with you during your, I don't want to speak for you, but your slowdown phase?
Just waking up and creating good habits. So I used to ice plunge, right? So now this is the big thing, right? I've been on it for a little bit now. It's more of a bigger thing, but the ice plunge was the one thing that really helped me because it's something that I wake up every morning and I don't want to do, but I do it because it's something that I know sucks. And like the first 30 seconds of it's all mental, right? The first 30 seconds of it, you're like, this sucks. In your mind, you panic, right? But choosing to wake up and do something that you absolutely hate and sticking to it can prepare me for any other thing that I have to deal with during the day. I as a police officer, I'll walk into work and I'll walk into a storm of problems, but nothing was worse than that ice bath that I did this morning. The water was, 24 degrees. Like, it's just waking up and doing something that you really don't want to do and just creating that habit, right? So it's ice plunge and then it's workout, journal, those kind of things, just waking up with intent. Because a lot of people, I think they just wake up and they just move, but they don't move with intention, right? They kind of mow through the day and they do not have any type of like direction. They just keep themselves so busy. And there's a phrase that I heard. It's called toxic positivity. It's like people will wake up and their life will be in shambles, but they wake up and they try to tell themselves like, oh yeah, everything's great. Everything's great. Meanwhile, they're like a duck on a pond, on the surface, everything is calm, but underneath their legs are just going great. And that's their life. That's a great analogy for their life. So when their life starts to suck, they just start to busy themselves. And the next thing you know, you're drowning because you've never addressed any of these issues. You just keep pushing forward instead of addressing it.
And it reminds me of the concept of busy versus productive. And I think at times we all, when you're struggling with something, whether it's physical, mental, emotional, job wise, I think there's the default where it's like, I need to be doing something. And yes, I agree with that. But I love how you word it, because there's doing something just to quote unquote do it. But then there's doing something with intention. I loved how you talked about the ice bath or cold plunge. People call them different things. I've been doing a cold plunge every day since the week of Thanksgiving. Sean Degnan, who's a good buddy of ours, and his brother Kevin, they actually got me on to it. I have the same actual physical tub that they do, and it's funny that you mentioned that 30 seconds because I post it almost every single day in my story, and a lot of people have been reaching out and asking comments or mentioning things to me. And when I have a conversation, it's the same thing. I tell them that you said. The first 30 seconds absolutely suck. There's nothing easy, fun, simple, and it's not the physical point at that. And I catch myself doing it all the time. That first 30 seconds, I'm like, all right, just make it 15 seconds and get out. All right, make it, 20 seconds and get out. And it's almost every single day. Once I get to around that 30-second mark, I then go for 2 to 5 minutes, depending on my schedule. But it's not easy. It's not fun. And I'm curious to pick your brain on this. Somebody asked me on a podcast I was interviewed this week, and they asked me if it gets easier. And I said, no. I said, it doesn't get easier. I said, you get stronger and you get mentally tougher. But I said to the host, I said, maybe a week or two ago, it was like 27 degrees in the water. I said, it was freezing. I said, I wasn't tougher. I was like, I wasn't stronger. I was like, I got better at it. And mentally, I said I was able to handle it better than I would have a month ago. I was like, but it still sucked before, during, and after.
Yeah. It's just, sharpening the axe, man, showing up every day and just doing it, man. It never gets easier. It's very challenging, man, because I feel like I do it every day and it's like, it still sucks. You figure like it's going to get easier, but it doesn't, it's just, you just got to show up. And that says a lot about a person if you can show up and do something that you really don't like, but you're just still doing it anyway. So I'm a huge advocate for it.
I think before this conversation or this episode, there's probably a bunch of listeners who are like, oh, I'm probably going to maybe start doing the cold plunge. And now after listening to you and me talk about how much it sucks, they're like, you know what? I'm going to stick to the sauna and the gym workout. If you could go back and give the 20-year-old version of yourself only one piece of advice, knowing what you know today, what would it be?
Be patient. I was a very impatient young man. I wanted whatever I wanted, and I wanted it now. I didn't, I didn't believe in the quote unquote process. I believed that I was the master of my own destiny, and I can create whatever way I wanted. And sometimes there's external forces that can redirect you. Sometimes, control what you can and just do what you. The only thing you can do is control how you respond to whatever adversity or whatever situation that you go through. You can't control anything else. And I used to believe that I had control over everything, and I don't. So 20-year-old Jason, I would just tell him to be patient.
I think you and I would have been good friends back at that age because it was the same thing for me. Is I saw something, I wanted it right this second. And it's not that I don't think I appreciated the process or hard work, but I didn't understand that this thing or idea or goal or achievement that I wanted never happens overnight. And it goes, I think, hand in hand with my concept of slow down. I know you're familiar with the famous quote by Jim Rohn, you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. If I could grant you dinner tonight with any 5 people, dead or alive, that you could level up with, who would you pick?
Ooh, phenomenal question. Oh, man. So, any 5 people, dead or alive, I'm going to have to say I'd like to sit down and have a conversation with Michael Jordan, the GOAT. I got to sit down and have a conversation with him. Only because if you watch that Last Dance, man, I never knew how the man thought. I just, as a child, I watched him and he was the guy. And you just thought he was good, right? But you don't realize how calculated he was and how, mentally sharp that man was. Like someone would say something, he would take that, vilify whatever that person said, and then just use that as fuel. So 1 would have to be MJ. 2, I'd like to sit down with Kobe, because to me, Kobe truly underappreciated, because I think we lost him so quick. He had a 20-year career, and then started to do things on the outside. I don't think we appreciated the greatness. The more I listen to him now, the Mamba mentality, the more I want to unpack that whole Mamba mentality. So 2 would be Kobe. 3 would have to be Jesus. I'd like to sit down and have a conversation with JC, the carpenter. Just to, because, a lot of the biblical stuff, cool. But just to see what it was to exist in a time, to do the things that he was doing, and to be crucified for our sins, I think I'd like to sit down and have a conversation for that. 4, this is where it gets a little spicy. I say my grandfather. My grandfather is a huge inspiration to me. I'm also his carbon copy. I look exactly like him. He died when I was about 26, and so much has happened since. I'm 41 years old now, and so much has happened since. And I would just have wanted him to see how I evolved, and a lot of the things that he taught me, I incorporate in my life now. So just seeing me now presently, I think would be great, and just to have a conversation, and so I can thank him for all the things that he instilled in me as a young child. And 5, Jackie Robinson, because what he did was unprecedented, and I know it was extremely hard for him, and for him to show up every day knowing that people didn't want to see him succeed and thrive, and for him to go out there and still kick ass. I would have to pick his brain on that.
That's a fantastic 5. I just based off of those 5, I would love to be a fly in that wall and be able to ask Jesus one question. And the question would be very simple. In his words, who's the GOAT when it comes to basketball? I think you and I stand on the same side with that answer, but would love to have it validated from somebody other than myself, because everybody who knows me knows I'm a huge Jordan fan. And for our listeners, I'm going to ask him a question at the end, but Jason's Instagram is JumpmanJ, which is awesome. So we connected on that as well. We're going to switch over to our hot seat questions. And the only request we have of you is you spit out the first thing that comes to mind.
Copy that.
Last meal, you can pick anything. What do you pick?
It's a Spanish dish called baleadas, which is like tortillas, refried beans with like some kind of protein and like cheese.
Favorite smell?
Cool water cologne. Reminds me of like middle school. I don't know why.
I was just about to say, I was like I think sophomore, junior in high school. That's brings back memories. All-time favorite sport?
Football.
Do you have an all-time favorite team?
Giants, unfortunately.
Favorite movie?
Goodfellas.
Favorite book?
You Can't Hurt Me.
What's your favorite app you use on your phone?
Instagram.
That's mine too, fortunately and unfortunately. What's your background picture on your phone?
Me and my dog.
If you could pick one superpower, any superpower, what would you pick?
Whatever Wolverine has, like the super healing ability, and he doesn't age. That's what I want, right there.
Do you have an all-time favorite quote?
Nothing works except work. A friend of mine told me that.
That's a great quote. And what's that one song, no matter whenever you hear it, morning, afternoon, or evening, you automatically just turn it up and rock out to it?
Rough Rider Anthem. That brings me back to my youth.
When I was coaching AAU basketball one year, that song was so popular. And I think as a team going to and from tournaments and games, I think we listened to it over like a 3-month period, like 900 times. It was just...
That's something that'll get you moving, man.
For our listeners, a fun question we ask is if there are 1 or 2 people out there that you follow on social media that really put out positive and uplifting stuff that maybe you'd like to introduce or possibly reintroduce to our listeners.
Hey, I'm going to say Sean and Dave, man. Sean is a remarkable young man, dude. I met him through the app, and then he happened to be. We were talking about 1 degree of separation. He happened to be. He's really good friends with the kid I coached in high school, who I'm extremely close with. So that's how the world works. And then he introduced me to Dave, and I just really enjoy what they're doing. collectively, but as separate entities, they're really good guys. You know what I'm saying? And it's very hard to walk into rooms and have men who have this like alpha presence that are open minded and accepting to hearing and viewing different things. And those two guys, since the moment I've met them, have been nothing but stand up individuals. I think their content is great. I believe that they're giving back, because a lot of people use this platform for nonsense. And then there's some people who use this platform to uplift and help others, and that's what they're doing. And I always take my hat off to guys like that, because it's a very unique space to move in. And like I said, you walk into a room with men, and sometimes it's like a dick measuring contest. It's like, oh, who's the bigger guy? And those guys are just good dudes, stand up individuals, and I believe that they put out good content and they mean well.
And wanted to give you an opportunity to let our listeners know where they can follow you, how they can connect with you, but also if you could briefly just introduce your own podcast to our listeners also.
Yes. So you can find me on Instagram. The Real Jumpman J, spells as it sounds. You write it all out and it's there. I run a podcast called Behind the Mic. We're doing some rebranding. We're going to change the name very soon. But Behind the Mic podcast is available on all streaming platforms except Apple. But you can, if you go to Spotify, you can find us there. We've been doing it. I was producing and helping with other podcasts since 2018. Started in 2021, and I've just kind of been rolling with the punches from here. It's doing really well now. We just signed a production deal. We work out of Yonkers, this place called Toyo Creative. Dave and Sean are coming down this Sunday to record a podcast. Looking forward to that as well.
That is awesome. And then last question we have, it's the same question we ask everybody, is if you have some parting words you'd like to leave with our listeners today.
Ooh, it's not as bad as it seems. When you're in the middle of a storm, the only thing you can think about is getting out of it, but it doesn't last forever. This too shall pass. So just know that whatever you're going through right now is not going to last forever. It's only going to make you better. You had mentioned this earlier, and I think it was a very admirable thing. I view it's no such thing as a loss. There's lessons. You know what I mean? Like, and if you don't go through that point, you'll know you won't learn how to sharpen the sword, right? So you got to go through something to become better. If everything you ever wanted was placed in front of you, then you wouldn't know the meaning or the definition of hard work and what it is to actually work and get something. So understanding that you're going to win some, you're going to lose some, but when you lose, are you getting better? Did you learn from that loss? And that's the name of the game. That's how you live life.
I couldn't say it better myself. So for our listeners out there, if you are not following Jay, I would highly recommend you follow him. Definitely check out his podcast. And I just want to thank you for jumping on here. And I know that we'll connect again soon.
Yeah, man, I appreciate you. Thank you for having me, dude.
Thank you for listening to episode number 463. Jason touched upon some very powerful things on today's episode. In his parting words, Jason shared that you might be going through a storm right now, and it's not as bad as it seems, and this too shall pass. Whatever challenge or obstacle you are currently going through, keep going. You will get through this, and remember, up to this point in your life, you have made it through 100% of your worst days. And remember, we rise by lifting others up. And lastly, to our listeners, thank you. We truly appreciate your time, and we hope our episodes inspire you to keep on attacking life and never giving up. To quote Dr. Norman Vincent Peale, it's always too early to quit.